Please be seated. So easy to take our musicians for granted, and then something goes wrong and we realise, whoa, completely out of our hands. I don't know whether you caught the news during the week that one Robert John Maguire had died. That's not how he was best known. He was best known as Father Bob. And for 40 plus years, and that's a long time, for 40 plus years, Father Bob was the parish priest at the Catholic Church in South Melbourne, St Peter's and St Paul's. As I say, it's a long stint, and he would have stayed longer, except he was forced into retirement at 77. And I do remember that in his own inimitable way, he says that he was dishonourably discharged at that particular age. But even then, after his retirement, he continued on as a priest at large. Well, Father Bob died last Wednesday at the age of 88. And I was staggered at the response on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday as I watched TV and listened to the news, mainly ABC radio, and also read the papers and followed a bit of Facebook. I really don't spend all that much time on any of those, but every time that I did, in the days after his death, I read or heard something in reference to Father Bob, and I started collecting them. And these are just some of the comments I jotted down. One of my friends, Mel, said, "Rest in peace, Father Bob. You represent the best of us. An irrepressibly cheerful champion for all battling disadvantage," said somebody else. "An advocate for the underdog and great fun to be around." In the last 10 or 20 years or so, Father Bob has been a bit of a presence on in the media, making numerous appearances on TV and on radio, and developing a bit of a cult status. He also developed a foundation, the Father Bob Maguire Foundation, which does all sorts of things, amongst which is providing free meals for those in need. And he set that up with the help of friends about 20 years ago. But back to the comments. An Australian legend, a national treasure, saint of the homeless, saint of the gutter, Saint Bob, such a good egg, a breath of fresh air. They broke the mould when they made him. Someone said he married us, he christened our kids, and had the whole church laughing and wanting to come back. A man of warmth and faith, the real deal when it comes to faith, a generous soul, and so on. So many people, so many remembering him and remembering him so well, inspired by him even, a gift from God, somebody said. The world is a poorer place for the passing of this larrikin priest, this compassionate and principle fighter, this trustworthy, down-to-earth good bloke. I found it remarkable. So many people seem to have a Father Bob moment, a Father Bob memory, a Father Bob tribute. My favourite description is this one. Part Billy Connolly, part Mother Teresa, part angry Old Testament prophet. But in the midst of that, I asked myself, there aren't too many clergy who would receive the sort of response that I heard via those forums over those days. And I asked myself the question, what can we learn from Robert John Maguire when it comes to living out faith? He lived it out his own way. He was his own man, as you've heard, but there might be something for us to learn. Anyway, remembrance is my theme for today, and we remember Father Bob, and I do so certainly with thankfulness. But we move on because this weekend is, of course, the Anzac Day weekend, and this coming Tuesday there'll be dawn services at cenotaphs around the country. There'll be the march, and that'll be televised. The last post will be played, although I doubt whether it'll be played anywhere as well as it was here today. Yeah, indeed. The ode will be read, and there'll be wreath laying, and there'll be two up in some quarters too. And there'll be the reading of names, which I always find incredibly moving. I was at St Peter's on Thursday, And I know here our hall is a memorial hall. It's a hall erected in memory of those who served Australia in times of war. But down at St. Peter's, when you wander in, directly opposite the entrance is a roll of honour and the names of 60 people who served in the Great European War of 1914 to 18, including Private C.B. Donaldson and Captain J.E. Donaldson, just two of those who died, presumably from the same family. As I say, I find it incredibly moving, not just when we remember Anzac Day and lay a wreath or even hear the last post, but when we hear the names of those who died. Anzac Day is a day of remembrance. But these days we don't just remember the Australian dead, we remember the Turkish dead, we remember all who died, not just our own. And we remember these days the senselessness of war too, the wasted lives, the tragedy that is any and every war, and all the victims. We remember those caught up, swept up in the tide of events that was war. War's never glorious. We can't idealise it. These days we salute courage and we pay tribute to those who were heroic, and there were some who were heroic for sure. But it's the sacrifices and the costs and the victims of war that we're most mindful of, I think. And we're mindful that our leaders don't always get things right. And even the Second World War, where evil was plain and the defeat of Nazism was so worth fighting for, even that war has moments like the bombing of Dresden that give us pause. So Anzac Day, a day on which we feel both thankful and uncomfortable and sad. I read these words. To remember the dead is to accept our kinship with them. Someone's son, someone's father, someone from here where I live, someone from St. Peter's, somebody who attended St. Michael's, someone who's Australian like me. And in remembering them, we're thankful for their willingness to serve and even to lay down their lives. And we're disturbed by the cost of engaging in war anywhere. In any case, I leave you to further reflection in this season of remembrance that we know as Anzac Day. For us as Christians, every Sunday is a day of remembrance. Every Sunday is Remembrance Sunday. We come together and we remember the things that Jesus said and did. We circle around the things that Jesus said and did. We eat and drink. We eat the bread and we drink the wine and remember. We read and remember. And so our gospel reading today takes us back to the time when the women had come to the tomb in which Jesus' bruised and bloody and broken body lay. They're there at the tomb, but they're not alone. Don't be afraid are words that they hear, not once but twice. He's not here, they're told, he's risen. Go tell the disciples and head to Galilee. And make haste to do that, they do. And on their way, they're met by the risen Jesus, who greets them and says pretty much the same. Do not be afraid. Go tell my brothers. In Galilee they'll see me. And if we were to read on in Matthew's Gospel, we would see that it concludes in Galilee with Jesus in the presence of his disciples and with him speaking these words, Go, make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. And lo, I'm with you always to the end of the age. And living 2,000 years on from these events, that is indeed what's happened. The church has spread and grown. People of all nations have been invited and persuaded to become followers, to become disciples of Jesus. But back to the women as I seek to wrap things up. They'd come to the tomb early that Sunday morning to mourn, to grieve, to reflect, but they left full of expectation and hope. The cross wasn't the end of the story. The story would continue and continue through the ages. And so I conclude by saying that whilst for us as Christians, every Sunday is indeed Remembrance Sunday. We remember the things that Jesus said. We remember the things that he did. We eat and drink. We're not simply people who look back in remembrance, We're also like those women. Despite having come to mourn and grieve, despite us having things to mourn and grieve, we're able to look forward in hope. And there's a sense in which every Sunday is not just Remembrance Sunday, but it's Resurrection Sunday. It's Easter Sunday. And so it is today. He's not here, they were told. He is risen. We are Easter people and people of hope as well as remembrance. Amen.